in Chimwiini. So if there's hope, I think it's there for a more stable community of speakers. So what about documentation of the language? Just to speak really briefly about the documentation project. Linguistic work on Chimwiini was done in the 70s between Charles Kisselbert, who's a well-known Bantu phonologist, and Muhammad Imam Abashek, who's a native speaker and was a PhD in linguistics at the University of Illinois. He was actually Kisselbert's student. They did just amazing work on foundational work on syntax phonology interface. This is just one of the papers, but there are others. Abhishek wrote his PhD on the causative construction. And they just also compiled a large body of work, which they continue to work on over the years. In 2003, Dr. Kisselbert then finally finished the lexicon, which was published then, which is an amazing resource for linguists, not so useful for native speakers, really. But an amazing lexicon of the language. But this is about the extent of the work. And so hence the need for more work. So in the current project, which just started this past year, it's funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities through the Documenting Endangered Languages program. We've been doing field work in Atlanta. I've done field work in Atlanta. I'll be going to London this summer and Mombasa next summer, whereas Chuck Kisselbert, who is a consultant on the project and has been amazing, just the way he's been working, dedicating himself to the project, is spending time in Columbus with speakers there. We're collecting digital audio and video data collection, doing transcription and annotation of traditional stories, testimonies, personal histories. People are very anxious to talk about everything that happened during the war and fleeing Brava and what life was like in Brava, so we're talking about those kinds of things. Also stenzi, which are traditional poems that are not written down, they're completely passed on orally. They're poems, but they're sung by women, and some of them are like an hour long. They're amazing, amazing things, and most of them are about religious topics or history. The plan is to do digital archives at Dobis at the Max Planck Institute. The thing that I'm focusing on most right now is getting a draft of the reference grammar done, a reference grammar of the language, and Chuck has been working, Dr. Kisselbert has been working really hard on the practical Chimwiini English Dictionary phrase book, which is something asked for by the community. They think the lexicon, the Chimwiini lexicon is great, but not so useful for them, great for linguists, not so useful for them. So they've asked for something like this. So we're working on that. We're working on a website, but also trying to do theoretically interesting linguistic analysis on the language. So that's kind of where I want to stop for the first part of the talk, and then we'll talk about some of this perhaps theoretically interesting work that we're doing on the language. But I thought maybe I'd pause here and see if there are any questions about this part of the talk. Yeah, Wally.
I'm very interested to listen to some of the wonderful information here. I know from the language I'm interested in, that they have a lot of Somali as a country.
Yeah.
Poets.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there is some kind of interface relationship between Mehri language, Chimwiini language, or
I doubt there's much connection there. There are very strong connections between Somalia and Yemen. And even in Brava itself, toward the end of the 19th century, there's a big influx of immigrants from the Hadramaut region who came to live in Brava. And there are, any given time, Yemenis people living in Brava. I don't know about Mehri speakers. I've never.
I have been told that there are 3 clans that located actually in Somalia, but I'm not exactly sure where.
Yeah. Well, I know there are much stronger connections between northern Somalia and Yemen. But this is kind of southern Somalia. Anything's possible, but I doubt it. Yeah. I just realized I spoke way longer than I planned to. I don't know if we're going to have time to do any syntax today.
My question is pretty short. I just didn't know. I didn't catch the beginning. So they're Muslim, or?
Yeah. Sunni Muslim. Yeah.
They have a lot of Quranic, vocabulary and things like that, or a lot of Islamic.
In the language, there are a lot of borrowings from Arabic, but this is true of Swahili generally. Even standard Swahili has something like a quarter of its vocabulary borrowed from Arabic. But all of it very Swahiliized, Bantuized. And this is true of Chimwiini as well. Although I have noticed in the Chimwiini culture, they're much more likely to use real Arabic pronunciations for certain words. Many of them do speak Arabic very, very well. In fact, the Bravanese are known for being sort of language experts. Actually, I had one more slide just to show you. This is my brain trust in Atlanta. These were guys I worked very closely with, and this guy in particular speaks very well, is a native Chimwiini speaker, but also speaks Somali and Italian and Russian and Arabic very well, all of them very fluently. This guy speaks Italian, is known to be an expert on Italian. And of course, they all are bilingual in Chimwiini and Somali. And also English, of course. Yeah, MJ.
I just noticed a couple of things. First, you
Sure.
said they had Latin for so very long over that two-thirds of the century.
Yeah.
And they still are maintaining themselves despite of the diaspora.
Yeah.
And you also said that you never seen anybody pull out cell phones and try to call London.
Right.
I'm wondering to what degree the fact that they were being governed by a circle of elders rather than a king or a singular head, because a singular head can be cut off.
Yeah.
If you've got a circle of elders, they're very difficult to get rid of.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm wondering to what degree that both protected them earlier when they were a small group and has made them still existent even if highly endangered now.
Yeah, I think.
You didn't have it in your list.
Yeah, you're right. I think it belongs in the list. And along those lines as well, kings can be succeeded. So if the head is cut off, you can grow a new one. But it's true of all of the 7 elders. So even at the local level, you may not have the most senior person from a certain clan in your community, but you have number 3 or number 4, and he'll do, right? So yeah, they very much have carried that over. And this struck me when I first was really getting to know the community in Columbus, at how much they have maintained this culture of being ruled by elders, even in the diaspora. They still live like they're all in the same city, even though they're not only will they get on the cell phones, but they'll get in their car and go drive to Michigan or Kentucky or Atlanta or whatever just for the weekend for some meeting that needs to happen. Yeah, it's a very good point. I've maybe underestimated that a little bit. Yeah.
Do they use the Arabic alphabet?
That's a good question. Traditionally, they did. So to the extent that Chimwiini was written up until the 19th century, it was written in Arabic, but it wasn't written very much. The writing in Chimwiini and in Arabic script is mostly consists of religious material. In Somalia at the time, most of the most official language was Arabic itself, and so they would just write official documents. I think a lot of them were actually written in Arabic. But there are conventions for adapting the Arabic alphabet to Chimwiini. Not a lot of people know them. Only the more highly educated people know them. But there is a writing system. I don't know it well myself. No one's been able to actually, tell me write it out for me and tell me what it is. But starting around, and definitely within the 20th century, people started to use the Latin script. Again, probably highly influenced by the standardized Somali script. So most people write it in Latin today, but it's still not completely standardized. So if you go to these, there are a few websites where people will post things in Chimwiini occasionally, and the writing is just kind of all over the place. So whatever people think sounds good, that's what they'll do. So one of the goals is to, and we've kind of struggled with this, like because we do have the lexicon, which introduced a kind of standard orthography, had to, right, because it's a lexicon, and it was mostly designed by that native speaker Abhishek that I told you about, who is highly respected. Everybody knows it. He actually passed away just this past year. Everybody knows his name. Everybody knows who he is. In fact, when I go to a community, when they ask me, well, why are you interested? What are you doing? I tell them I'm continuing the work of Muhammad Imam Abhishek. And that's